to the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. I'm Randy Karraker. It's great to have you with us. Always good to talk sports with St. Louis, especially when it's with one of my best friends, Mike Claiborne. You hear him on Cardinal broadcasts on KMOX, and of course, you hear Mike and see Mike on claibsonline.com. A longtime St. Louis broadcaster. Michael, always good to see you.
Better to be seen than viewed.
Mike has a long-held belief that you really don't know when a baseball season starts until Flag Day, which is June 14th. I'm a Memorial Day guy. Here we are, Memorial Day weekend. And, Mike, you look at this club. It's been a roller coaster, the Cardinals, so far in 2023. But what's your take so far with the body of work that you know about?
You know, I think what I'm seeing now is what I envisioned in spring training, from as far as the commitment, the balance in the batting order, things of that nature. Now, the pitching obviously is still a concern, and how you fix that in midseason, I guess we'll find out. But overall, I like the direction that they're going. They're not beating themselves. They've had some games this year, a lot of games, where the ones they may have lost, they had a winning run at second base in the ninth inning. So it's not like they're getting blown out or being embarrassed, but I think they're starting to come together. And Randy, I really feel like now the WBC, I think that's part of the problem that we saw with this team at the beginning of the year, where there was just they weren't cohesive. And there were a lot of things they were trying to figure out. And it's nobody's fault. It was just how things unfolded. But when you have 17 guys playing for various countries, and some of those guys probably should have stayed with the Cardinals in order to make the team and be able to contribute. I think it took more of a toll on it than I think we expected.
And perhaps the biggest part of that was the starting pitching that was away, with Michaelis and Wainwright not being able to not only get together with Wilson Contreras, but a new pitching coach, too. They knew Dusty Blake, but he hadn't been their pitching coach before.
No. And I think also their veteran leadership, I think, was important for the younger pitchers who were like a Palante and Cabrera and some other guys who were trying to find their way. They didn't have that. Jack Flaherty was the senior man when everybody left. And, as far as Cardinals were concerned, and Jack was trying to figure out where he was in his career. And so there were a lot of things I thought that created some, for lack of a better term, distractions.
I had multiple conversations with a friend of yours, and you can read him, by the way, at Claibs Online, Rick Hummel, during the course of the offseason. We always talk baseball, and you can talk for a half hour, and I would always come back to, it really all comes down to what Jack Flaherty is. This team ultimately, unless they go out and get a number one type guy, it's going to come down to how good Jack Flaherty is.
Yeah, but, I'm going to go back. I used to think you had to have a number one. I think I'd rather have a couple of number twos, maybe a couple of number threes, and go that route, because the number one most of the time is going to get hurt in some way, shape, or form. And when he goes down, everybody looks around and says, what now? So give me some guys in that 2 spot, a guy in a 3 spot, and I'll take my chances over having a guy that I'm only going to be able to use once a week.
So with that being the case, how do you feel about this Cardinal rotation right now? Do you have enough of those 2s and 3s to satisfy you?
No. I still think that Flaherty, Michaelis, I'm good with. I think Jordan Montgomery has certainly made some significant strides, but he's trying to figure out what swim lane he's in. And I also think there's some other guys who are trying to figure out what their role is and not look on the calendar and say, okay, I'm the 4th guy or I'm the 5th guy. It's your turn to pitch. Tony La Russa was big on not labeling starters, right. And I think that's how we have to address this team.
I think the Cardinals, especially since the trades of Alcantara and Arozarena, deal with a level of fear with their kids now. And I think they're at a point now with that pitcher that you talk about where they kind of have to be fearless. And I'm not talking about getting rid of Nolan Gorman or Jordan Walker, but I think that they need to realize that, hey, we need to get this guy, and we're going to have to pay a lot for him. And the future be damned. You've got Adam Wainwright's last year. You've got Arenado and Goldschmidt in their prime. You've got a young Nolan Gorman who's emerging. This is a team that has a chance if they add one piece.
The window is open, but it won't be open for long, because that transition between Goldschmidt and Arenado to where we see the Gormans of the world and soon to be Walker and Wynn, you want to be able to try and strike lightning in a bottle now. The whole thing about what do you want for a player, I think the way you approach it is you give what team you're looking to deal with. Here's the list of people that aren't available. So you can pick anyone else. And the Cardinals have been good about moving players. Now, they've had a couple, you go back and you look at Alcantara and what happened there. Zach Gallen is a guy that just didn't have a role in this organization. But overall, most of the guys they've been able to move on have not lived up to the hope that the team that acquired them would be. For instance, you look at Colorado. They gave up a lot they got a lot in return for Arenado, and they don't have many of those guys contributing. You look at Arizona, what they got in return for Paul Goldschmidt, and I don't think they've been happy with their return. Now, on the other side of that coin, we ended up with Marcell Ozuna, and we unloaded the Cy Young Award winner. So, it goes back and forth, but I think the Cardinals have shown they've been better in the trade market than they have been in the free agent market.
But you look at a guy like Shane Bieber in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Cleveland is going to turn young players into good players, right? With what they got in exchange for Francisco Lindor, they've gotten good quality out of that. Arizona and Colorado are less likely to turn guys into players than a franchise like Cleveland.
Well, they don't have a track record of it, that's for sure.
No, they sure don't, right? So even if the Cardinals could make a move like that, and I don't know what the availability of Bieber would be or how expensive he would be for the Cardinals, but I would go a little extra to get a guy like that.
I would agree with you. And from all accounts, he is available. And I'm sure the Cardinals will kick the tires on it like many other teams. And I think the concern is you don't want to wait too long because, A, the price will go up, the competition will be stiffer with other teams who may have prospects. If you need them, do the deal. Don't wait until, end of July. Go for it now. And at least that person, whoever it is, whether it's Bieber or somebody else that we're not thinking of, at least will be acclimated with this team before we get to the deadline and all that, and he's already found his swim lane to be able to be effective.
Mike Claiborne with us on the 101 on Sports. It's been 35 years since the St. Louis Cardinals moved to Arizona, became the Phoenix Cardinals, and then the Arizona Cardinals. Mike and I have some great memories of the old Big Red here in St. Louis. We're going to have story time with Mike Claiborne coming up on the 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Welcome back to the 101 on Sports. Great to have you with us. Mike Claiborne alongside. And it has been 35 years, Michael, since the Arizona Cardinals became the Phoenix Cardinals. They left St. Louis. They were actually only in St. Louis for 28 years and then went to Phoenix. And it's amazing for me how vivid my memories are of the St. Louis football Cardinals. And I know you're the same way.
Oh, yeah. I remember the Monday night game, the 38-0 game against the Dallas Cowboys, what Don Coryell meant to the football Cardinals in St. Louis, that offense. And then you fast forward to where there was a Neil Lomax and Roy Green. The Cardinals had so many exciting offensive players. Defensively, whole nother story. I mean, they couldn't stop breathing, let alone another offense. I mean, they were bad. And they were always one or two players short. You had a Hall of Famer in Roger Worley, and there were some other individuals who had maybe good seasons, but they just couldn't put 11 good defensive players on the field. And the organization was comical, from Joe Sullivan and all the other people who drafted people, George Boone, who said once, I didn't want to meet the player because I might like him.
Right.
The things that they did. And I'm amazed, Randy, that no one's written a book about the antics that took place with the football Cardinals and how they did business.
It was remarkable how Mr. Bidwill was in complete charge, and he never had a general manager here in St. Louis, but the personnel moves, the fact that they took a player named Clyde the Glide Duncan over another wide receiver who became an all-pro. He was the offensive rookie of the year, Lewis Lips. And perfect example, Jim Hannafin, for the first time in memory, is allowed in the draft room. And so he's there. He's asked for a big receiver, and the Cardinal director of scouting, George Boone, finds him a big receiver named Clyde Duncan out of Tennessee. And Louis Lips, who's far and away the best receiver in the draft, is surprisingly still on the board for the Cardinals. And they get down to the Cardinals draft position, and Bill Bidwill turns to Jim Hannafin to ask his opinion. Okay, who do you like here between Duncan and Lips? And Hanny made the big mistake of saying, Duncan, he's a hell of a player. He's big. He's what we're looking for.
Gosh,
but yeah, I talked to Don and Ernie Zampese, Don Coryell, who had left here under bad terms, and Ernie Zampese, his offensive coordinator. Yeah, I talked to Don and Ernie. They think that Louis Lips is going to be a Pro Bowler. And Bidwill immediately turns to George Boone and says, let's take Clyde Duncan. Because of the vitriol that he had for Don Coryell and the way he left.
And not only that, if Lips was going to be a really good player, that meant Biltwell was going to have to pay him more.
That's true.
And,
yeah.
and when it came to paying people, it was not a day at the beach. I remember the Cardinals had a guy named Harry Gilmer, who was a scout.
This is great.
And so we're at a game one day, and I said, "Hey, Harry, how's scouting going?" He said, "Well, we were looking all over the country, looking at different players." I said, "Well, what about Jerry Rice?" He said, "Who?" I said, "Jerry Rice." He said, "Mississippi Valley State. He's going to be a pretty good player. I've seen him." He says, "We don't scout those schools."
A Southern drawl, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, it was those sort of things that made them they were a catastrophe. I mean, in every sense of the word. And they had nice people working there, Dale Harris, Bob Wallace, a number of different people that we all got to know over time. But as an organization, I don't think there's ever been anything close to this in St. Louis sports.
No. And it makes what Don Coryell, the new Hall of Famer, did all the more incredible. I'll never forget. So we endured 4-9-1, 4-9-1, 4-9-1 for 3 consecutive years. It was a 14-game schedule. Don Coryell's first year, 4-9-1. So we get to the 1974 season. We're thinking, okay, we're going 4-9-1. They start off 7-0, 7-0. And I remember vividly, Mike, the Globe Democrat, which was the morning paper at the time, the top headline was "Football Cardinals improved to 7-0. I'll never forget that. And they were the cardiac Cardinals. They would come back and win games late. Yeah. Nobody thought they could win. But for Don Coryell to go to the playoffs 3 consecutive years, should have gone 3 consecutive years, 10-4, 11-3, 10-4. That's pretty amazing to do with that organization.
It was. And for them to win double digits in games, but the problem is they get crushed when they got in the playoffs. The Rams crushed them. Green Bay destroyed them, and I'm trying to think. The Vikings. They were a team that could play the regular schedule, but when they found other playoff teams to face, they had nothing because they couldn't. Defensively, they couldn't stop anybody.
Okay, some of our favorites here: the Eric Dickerson game.
Eric Dickerson. So you'll love this story. So Eric Dickerson, it's 3rd and 33 from the Rams 4-yard line, and he takes a draw up the middle, and the next thing you know, they're setting up on the 48-yard line of the Cardinals. So when the game's over with, they're interviewing him, and he said he was sitting in his room watching a pregame show, and this is when you didn't spend that much time at the stadium before the game. He was watching a pregame show. A local sportscaster was just ripping him and the Rams, and it just fired him up. But they would destroy the Cardinals. How about when Billy Waddy?
Oh yeah.
The Cardinals the Rams had a punt return. His name was Billy Waddy. Cardinals had a guy named John Bearfield, Dr. Doom. I mean, he was built. I mean, physically, his conformation was unlike anything we'd ever seen.
He wore a quarter in his ear because he had to be at least the 25th wonder of the world.
Exactly. That was his thing. He had all the shtick you could imagine. Could you imagine what he'd be like on social media today?
Oh, man.
So anyway, he goes down on a punt and it was a kind of a cheap shot. Hits Billy Waddy, knocks every tooth out of Billy Waddy's mouth. They had to carry him off. The next time they went down on a punt, 2 Rams players cut him at the knee, and that was the end of his career. They paid him back. I mean, the Cardinals had a lot of characters. What about Kirby Criswell?
Oh, yeah.
He eventually went to the penitentiary. We had a deaf player, Bonnie Sloan. Mm-hmm. We had a gentleman from Australia.
A quarterback that stuttered, Bill Donkin.
That's right. Yeah.
They get him into a game, they didn't realize he stuttered. And then all of a sudden, Jim Hart gets hurt and it's delay a game. Get up there. Okay, so it's 1st and 15. He can't spit out the signal.
He couldn't even say his own name. So the lack of scouting.
It's like the lawyer in My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, exactly. It was. You couldn't make this up. You really couldn't make it up. But then there were some really good players. Man. Jim Hart, Terry Metcalf, Dan Dierdorf. Then you move down, there's Roy Green, Neil Lomax, Otis Anderson, Theodis Brown. I mean, there were some guys, Pat Tilley. Mm-hmm. We had some really good players. Of course, the Hall of Famer Jackie Smith. Yeah. I mean, there were some really good individual offensive players. If you notice, I think I've only mentioned one good defensive player, and that was Roger Worley. But overall, it was must watch. If you ever want to see a train wreck, this is it.
Yeah. And Mike, we both are friends with Roy Green. 1984, Cardinals are playing the Cowboys here in St. Louis, 37-yard line, 4th quarter. Cards are down 24-17, and Neil Lomax hits Roy Green with a perfect touchdown pass. Everson Walls of the Cowboys on the coverage. Flag flies. Well, something happened away from the ball. No, they call Roy Green for pass interference, even though he barely touched Everson Walls, and the penalty is enforced. Offensive pass interference. Cardinals don't score. They wind up losing the game. And after the game, Everson Walls actually came up to Roy and said, "Man, I'm really sorry. I know I didn't touch you. It was terrible." And the Cardinals would have won that game. I'm convinced, Mike, that if that call isn't made, Pat Millett was the back judge who made that pass interference call. I'm convinced that if he doesn't make that call, Cardinals wind up in the playoffs, 1984 season, I think they stay in St. Louis and they're still here.
See, I thought if Neil O'Donohue made the field goal in Washington, had they won that game, they would have won the division, and I think that would have kept them here as well. In my opinion, that was one of the greatest second halves of football I've ever seen.
It was phenomenal. It's on YouTube. 1984 Cardinals at Washington. If you want to watch it, it was unbelievable.
It's just incredible. But an interesting time, especially for us. We're young, we're new in the business, and just taking this all in was interesting. Because then, in training camp, the media ate with the players and the coaches, and they were all in one room. How about the time when Bill Bidwell was a voracious eater, okay? And they were serving fish on Friday. I'll never forget.
And Mike and I always went together to training camp.
We'd always go. So fish on Friday. And so Bill Bidwell had on this white shirt, and he took the ketchup. You know how people shake the ketchup up? Well, apparently the lid was not on. The next thing you know, it looked like he'd been assassinated. I mean, just ketchup was just running all. And everybody was like, oh, my God. You know, he did everything short of just dip a French fry on it. It didn't faze him.
No.
I mean, he was a different person, very giving, quietly. Mm-hmm. He took care when East St. Louis football would play the state championship games in Evanston, Illinois. They had an AstroTurf field, which was very new to St. Louis. He made sure that the football team had turf shoes to play in. I mean, he was a very quiet donor in a lot of different causes. He was not a bad person. He was just a person that made bad decisions.
And I think he knew he wanted to win. He just didn't know how to win.
And he didn't have anybody around him who knew how to win. And that was the other problem that he had. And even how he was treated like a second-class citizen in St. Louis as far as owners were concerned. But he tried his best, and it's amazing. All he wanted was a stadium, and he deserved one. Yeah. Because the Cardinals, the football Cardinals, had to, they could only practice at certain times because the baseball team was playing that night, and it was just really inconvenient. He shared no revenue in the suites that they had, so it was just an unfortunate situation. And you know what? I really didn't blame him. I was disappointed. But I understood why he had to go.
No, he had to go, and we as a community messed that one up. As much as we tried to keep the Rams and Stan Kroenke here, he couldn't wait to get away. Well, it was the exact opposite. Bill Bidwell wanted to be here in the worst way, and we pushed him as a community away.
Well, I'll go back to the couple station apartment, those buildings. One of the city fathers, they had a deal done. They were going to have a stadium in an arena downtown. And one of the city fathers said, well, we have these old buildings. They're like national landmarks that we have to preserve. And the deal fell through. And now they're apartment buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the most heinous things that's ever taken place in St. Louis sports, and just how the civic fathers got involved in depriving sports fans of, good teams, good facilities, because they wanted to preserve a couple of buildings.
Yep. Mike Claiborne with us. Mike has a great demeanor and a great philosophy about broadcasting. I'm going to get into that as we head down the stretch here on this edition of The 101 on Sports here on Fox 2. Welcome back to The 101 on Sports with Mike Claiborne. I'm Randy Karraker. You can hear Mike, of course, on Cardinal Broadcast, and check him out at claibsonline.com. And Mike, you and I have both been in this business for about the same amount of time, 40 years for me, a little over 40 for you. And because of your approach, I've taken an approach too. And we go to work because we're in the sandbox of life, right, in sports, to have a good time. But the other thing is that we both like to see young people advance, and that's something that you did before I did. What made you want to see young people advance in this business?
That's a great question, because when I first started in the business, I didn't have anybody that mentored me or helped me. Eventually, Jack Buck and Mike Shannon really kind of came to the rescue, for lack of a better term. But I always felt like if I ever have any sort of success, I would not want somebody to go through what I went through. And I don't ever want a young person to come through St. Louis and say that nobody tried to help them be better. Now, sometimes they don't take the advice. They get a little frosty about it, and that's okay. But, my thing is I just show up looking to work hard at having a good time. And it's worked for the most part. But overall, watching some of these young people ascend in our business, it makes you feel good that they did listen. And because, you can recognize talent. We've been at this long enough. We know who's going to float and who's going to sink. And I've been very happy with the growth and development of some of the people we've worked with.
Me too. And we were so lucky to have Mike Shannon and Jack Buck right at the top of the list when we were there at KMOX. But there were just a lot of people. Nancy Drew was there, and Jim Holder, and some of the other people that helped us along.
Jim Holder doesn't get enough credit for his impact on broadcasters like you and I. We weren't blessed with the great voice that Jim had, but he was always a guy that was helpful. And I owe him so much as far as my career is concerned because of what he meant to me in the early stages. Plus, he's the voice of football in St. Louis as far as the PA system is concerned. Right. The doors are now open.
Exactly. Hey, as we head down the stretch, you have a great labor of love in Claibs Online, getting into the digital space, and it's been very successful. But some of the people that you have working and doing great things at Claibs Online.
Dr. Rick Lehman, noted sports surgeon, orthopedic surgeon who's worked on just a ton of Olympians and a lot of other superstar athletes in his career. And I work with Joe Roderick. We do a fun job. We call it Lunch with Claibs and Joe. We just kind of hash around what took place over the weekend. And Matt Rocchio, who, in my opinion, is maybe one of the top 3 most knowledgeable guys when it comes to basketball in St. Louis.
Absolutely.
And what the job he's doing for us is just phenomenal. So we've got a good collection. And then, we have some other people from the outside that participate. We've had the Joe West podcast, and had Charles Barkley part of that at one point. But we've had a lot of good conversations and a lot of fun things that we're doing. Alex Ferrario has been a huge help to us when it comes to hockey, and we're going to expand that next year even more because I think the Blues are going to be more fun to watch next year than they were this year.
You do great work. Thank you so much. It's great to reminisce with you.
Anytime. Folks, let me tell you, this guy and I, we have so many stories. We'll have to put them on. It can't be over the air, but we have so many stories, and this is as good of a friend as I've ever had in the business, and it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, we'll do that someday at Claibs Online.
Yeah, we can do it there.
We'll have some good stuff. Hey, we thank you for being a part of the show. Thanks so much for joining us on The 101 on Sports. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next time here on Fox 2.